I think we are ready. So welcome everybody. I'm Daniel Golden from Boswell Book Company. That's Lisa Bedoyan from Books and Company. You'll be hearing from more in a moment. It is for Boswell. It is day 4,239.
And welcome Elizabeth tonight. We are going to be talking about I'll Be Seeing You. And when I first opened my copy of the book, I came to that first page, Elizabeth, and it was just looked like a list of a poem. It looked like a poem to me. And it was just a list of all of your novels and all of your books. And it was amazing to see all of that. So it's kind of breathtaking. So congratulations on all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really kind of cool. And Elizabeth grew up as an Army brat, but her family has really strong roots here in the Midwest. So you can feel that, and I think in a lot of her stories too. So tonight we'll be talking about the memoir, I'll Be Seeing You, and we will start, Elizabeth, with you kind of giving an elevator pitch about the story and maybe reading a few pages.
Sure. So I'll Be Seeing You is described in the book as a diary of my parents' decline. Sounds like a real romp, right? But what happened is that my dad got Alzheimer's and my parents could no longer stay in the home where they'd been for so long. This is a very familiar story to so many. And for those of us in the sandwich generation, where we're trying to help our kids and then we also start helping our parents, it can be a uniquely stressful time. It can also be a really beautiful time. And I hope that anyone who reads this book comes away with that, comes away with feeling like they've landed in a place of grace. That said, I don't hold back in it. It's really honest. And I tell you some things about myself that I'm not proud of and that I wish I'd done differently, because I think it helps in situations like this to be honest. If you're going to tell someone what it's like, then tell them what it's like. So I'm going to read a very short section. Pretend you're in Mrs. Menefee's kindergarten class and you're seated at her feet and she's reading you a story. And this occurs near the end of the book, but it won't spoil anything for you. I have a friend whose elderly mother lives with her, excuse me, and is driving her crazy. Her mother was once a talented artist, an intellectual with myriad interests. Now, my friend says, she gets up in the morning and makes a cup of coffee and she's so slow doing it. I mean, I just watch her sometimes to see how she can possibly be so slow. Then she sits at the kitchen table and talks about what might be for lunch. I just can't stand it. All she talks about is her cup of coffee in the morning and the weather and what her next meal will be. I really wonder, is there any meaning to the end of life? I suppose one way to answer that question is to think about how a baby's meaning in life is a ray of sunshine, the color red, the nearness of his mother's flesh. For a teenager, it's music, fitting in, hormone management. In midlife, meaning comes from focusing on our families, our jobs, our involvement with the world outside our kitchens, which is to say that the meaning of life is ever changing, even as we are. Who's to say that the richest time of life might not be when a cup of morning coffee fills the world? If you found a holy man hidden away on a mountain who found fulfillment in such seemingly simple things, would you not admire him? It is a very warm summer morning, and my parents are both alive and ambulatory. They are still capable of enjoying a slice of apple pie and of having a conversation. They are living together in what will probably be the last home they will ever share. Imagine them at the kitchen table. My mother will serve breakfast on the embroidered tablecloth. The day will pass. Laundry will be done, the mail will be gotten, the phone will be answered, People they pass in the hall will be acknowledged. Lunch and dinner will be eaten. Someone may drop by for a visit. In the evening, the television will be on and they will sit watching their shows. They will go to bed together. My father has never and will not now go to bed without my mother. And while the moon follows an ancient path across the night sky, they will lie next to each other with their eyes closed. In the morning, the first thing they see will be each other.
True.
Well, we both love the book, so we're
I'm so-
sort of there's there's so much grace in the book. It is so honest. I know, my family went through some of the things that you talk about. It's such a universal experience. My first question for you is, how different was it to write this memoir than it was for your novel?
Well, for one thing, I didn't really plan on publishing it. I wrote what was happening as it was happening as a way to come to terms with it, as a way to try to understand what was going on in those people around me, my family, and in myself. There was a lot of frustration involved, a lot of ambiguity, a lot of confusion, frustration, and it really helped to just get it down. What is going on here? First, they say they want to move. Then they say they don't want to. Then my mother wants to move, my father doesn't. Then my father wants to move, my mother doesn't. And you want to help, and you don't know how to help. You're not crying, are you, Daniel?
No, I'm remembering.
Yeah. So
laughing.
write it out, and this has been true of me forever and ever. When there's something inside me that's making me really happy or really sad or really confused or whatever it is, the way I come to understand it is to write about it. So I wrote about it, and then I was in a writer's group and I was bringing this material into them. And it occurred to me that this might help other people. And they said, yeah, this will really help other people. It's dangerous. It feels dangerous to be this honest, frankly. And after I had decided to publish it, I sent the manuscript to my sister, who's a major player in this book. She's the one who lives in Minnesota, where my parents do, and did all the heavy lifting. I sent it to her and I said, I want you to tell me if there's anything in here that you think reveals too much or will hurt someone or in any way will make you think, I don't think you should publish this book, because if you feel that way, I don't have a problem not publishing it. I sent it to her and she sent me back an email with 2 words, all caps, publish this. So that was, I still get the chills when I say that. That was really meaningful to me. And there is a lot of talk in this book about my Aunt Tish, who was wonderful. She was so wonderful and funny and always interested in everybody's life and a great cook. And her daughter just read the book and I was super nervous about that. I was kind of waiting and I didn't hear right away after I sent it. And I told Bill, who's here, although you can't see him, but Bill's old wild Bill is here. I told Bill she hates it. She hates it. She's mad at me because I did not ask her permission, nor did I ask permission of any of the other relatives asked. But she just emailed me today and she said, it's hard to see through the tears. I really loved it. Thank you for writing it. And I've been really gratified by the response of people to this book, of saying it, this is a little tough, to really reveal all this stuff, but it's helpful.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, one of my high school booksellers picked it up and she finished it and she said it was just amazing. So I think it appeals to old and young. I think we were all sort of surprised that she just loved it.
That's
So
great.
I was going to ask too about just how you knew, because there's that space between when it took place and when you published it. How did you know when it was time to take it forward with people? And also, I noticed too that you chose 9 months. You chose 9 months out of this journey to write about, and that to me seemed very symbolic for sort of the gestation of the changes.
You're giving me too much credit. I would love to say
well, and I was wondering if you even thought that.
I thought about that. Yes, it's an obvious parallel. It was kind of genius. That wasn't true. It just happened. It just happened to be that way. There was a point at which I wanted to start writing down what was happening. If for no other reason than to have an index as to how my dad, say, was doing, and my mom too. What is this slipping she's talking about? And how often is it occurring? And what form does it take, and so on? But it just happened to be 9 months. And then by the time you all know, everybody knows, it takes a while to write a book, and then it takes a while to publish a book. So my favorite part of this book is that in the beginning, in the prologue, I get to say, I am 70 years old, when in fact, I'm 72 in December. But I could just say it. I'm 70, a slip of a girl.
So I will tell you that one of our questions from one of the people was, are you really 70 or are you lying?
What a wonderful question.
I'm not asking people how old they are.
Well, it's right. It's pretty easy to find.
No, I know it's there, but I don't care. I'm like, I'm not talking about it. My mother taught me never to talk about anybody's age.
What's your religion?
Yeah.
Who did you vote for? Yeah, I know. There are all those things you're not supposed to say, but you know what? I think there's a lot of ageism. Always has been. Maybe there always will be, but I don't like it. And not just because I'm getting to be the age where it affects me. And here's my idea. I want to start a magazine called Crone, which will be a magazine for older women that will have wonderful poetry and fiction, but also here's a dress you'd look great in. Isn't that a good idea? Kind of like what Lear's was supposed to.
I was going to say, I was thinking of Lear's, and I thought, but I don't know how old the people were supposed to be in Lear's. The way the society is like, if you're over 45.
Let me tell you something. You know why you didn't know how old they were supposed to be at Lear's? Because she dyed her hair. She started out with gray hair, and then she dyed it. And then this is my theory. And then everybody got all mixed up. Just own it. You're getting older. You're lucky you got to live this long. There are some negative things, but there are some really positive things too. There really are. So anyway, somebody wrote on here, I just saw it. Yeah, do that magazine.
Publish this. You knocked out one of my big questions, which was about whether you had to change characters or veil people's identities or hybrid people, because I thought, it's a memoir, don't you have to do that? So tell me what so you really didn't, you said, I'm just gonna write it and just see. I mean, your sister, I mean, Tish and her daughter come out,
They're so great.
They'll have a fan club by the end of people reading this book. So.
I know, it's true. Yeah,
Good.
so many stories about my aunts. That I grew up an Army brat. So when we were living in the States, we would go home to Minnesota every summer, and I would stay with one aunt. And then I moved to Tish. I was with Lala for a while, and then I moved to Tish's house. And those memories are still so rich and clear to me, washing up in a metal dishpan in Lala's sink in the kitchen. And boy, you better not miss cleaning your ears either. And the ivory soap would be floating in there. And there were so many kids all over the place. There were so many kids. My mother only had 3 kids, but my relatives had 5 kids, 6 kids. So all these kids running around all over the place. And they're really rich and wonderful memories of the adults being in the kitchen drinking coffee and eating donuts, and us kids on the porch beating the crap out of each other. It was really great. The fights were on the black and white TV in the living room. The Hamm's beer commercials, remember those? Yeah.
Oh, Hamm's. Yeah. Well, we're not from, actually, I do remember them, but I'm not, I guess they were national for a while, but they were owned by Pabst. And so we would go to when I first moved here, we would go to the Pabst Brewery gift shop, and they had like a whole room of Hamm's memorabilia.
Yeah. But it was, so you have all these memories. We all do, these memories of growing up with these people who it seems suddenly that they get old. It seems like it's all of a sudden, but it's not. But it seems like it. I mean, certainly I guess that the downfall in this book for my mom and they were down to 3 sisters. There were 6 sisters, but they were down to 3. And it was Tish who could still drive. So, she was like the popular girl in high school. She could still drive. And she fell and broke her arm and could no longer drive. And everything went downhill after that, it seems, everything. So
they were quite the shoppers.
Pardon?
They were quite the shoppers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But they'd go to the dollar store, That's
Herberger's. And Herberger's.
Yeah, they go to, and at Herberger's, but if you recall, there's a scene in there, well, Tish dies in the book, and she is buried in this beautiful turquoise blouse. And my mother told me she bought that blouse at Herberger's and it went on sale. So she returned it and bought it again at the sale. They were characters. They were characters.
Lisa, I'm going to just start talking about department stores. So you have to.
Oh, you should ask about the department stores.
Well, I just wanted to, this is ridiculous. It has nothing to do with the book, but it's about your sister's shopping. And when I'm not sisters, your aunts shopping, your mom and your aunts. When they were, because Herberger's was kind of irrelevant. When they were younger, what store did they go to? Because actually they would be of a generation that it's Dayton's and Donaldson's.
They grew up in the Depression. They didn't go shopping, and they would, all these girls, and they slept 2 or 3 in a bed, and then who was ever up first got to pick the clothes to wear for the day. So it behooved you to get out of bed because then you get the best outfit. But the clothes were passed down and passed down and passed down. And so
they never ran out of things to wear because the stores had bargain basements. I mean, it wasn't like by the 80s, everybody was like, you have a store that caters to a certain customer. But back then they tried to.
Well, by the 80s, no, I mean, my aunts got married and had husbands, and I don't know. I mean, my mother always liked a good bargain, though, always. Yeah. She would like the thrift shops. She worked in a thrift shop so she could get the bargains first.
We always worry about that. I remember when I was donating. It's true. Yeah. The staff's gonna, you bring something in, you're like, the staff's gonna get all the good stuff.
All the good stuff, yeah. Yeah.
All right, Lisa, get us on another subject.
Yes, on another subject. Well, I grew up in New Mexico, but my family's from the Midwest and from Minnesota. So it was like it was so familiar to me. And I thought, it can't just be that connection for the region. So when you were writing and kind of telling the whole story, what sort of reassurances from telling the story and hearing from like your writing group that kept coming back and forth, coming again and again, just the things that made the story seem so universal?
It has nothing to do with where it took place, because the phenomenon of aging and the feelings that children have toward their parents and their parents toward them are universal. When it's a tough life transition, and if we are lucky to live long enough, it's going to happen to all of us. So the value in writing this book for me, and I hope the value in people reading it, is that you learn things along the way. One of the things that I think people will learn reading this book is what not to do. What not to do, you know, to understand that you're going to take sometimes one step forward and 3 steps back, that sometimes the things that seem so obvious to you, you know, why are my parents not getting this? You can't live in your house anymore. It's not obvious to them at all, not at all. And so a great deal of patience is required, and going over and over the same things sometimes. But when you see that someone is going through such a struggle, it's such a battle, and they emerge victorious, maybe not in a way that you would think about in a book or a movie. It's small victories that mean everything. And it's sort of like what I read in the excerpt, that this is their life now, you know, the mail will be gotten, the phone will be answered, they may have a visitor. But in the end, they were so deeply entwined. And it's really true that my father would never go to bed without my mother. He could be sitting in the chair falling asleep. He would not go to bed until she did. And I guess in some ways you could look at him as being a very romantic man, which I did. He, for example, was serving on board ship during World War II, and he got a letter from my mom. You know, they had mail call on the deck of the ship. He got the letter from my mom, it blew out of his hand, and he jumped in the ocean to get it. And I said to him once, why did you do that? Wasn't it dangerous? And he said, yeah, I guess it was. But he wanted the letter. I mean, he was so romantic. She was less so, actually. When they came to stay with me, I had a house in Wisconsin, which I missed so much. It was in the Kettle Moraine district, and it was so beautiful. But anyway, they were staying with me there, and I had a guest room, and it had 2 twin beds. And when they came into the room, my mom went, my own bed. My dad was probably going, you know. But anyway, they were really entwined. It was like a Reagan marriage, and they went through a lot of really hard times when my dad was diagnosed, and he didn't know that he was saying the same thing 3 times a day. He didn't know why his wife was enraged. She was enraged not only because she was losing her husband, but because she had lost Tish and her house and effectively her life. So you see them going through that, and you see the accommodation they make to it, which, by the way, with all your advice and all your pushing and all this and all that, they come to by themselves. It's their state of grace that they come to.
You really bring your mom's dilemma sort of to life. I mean, it is a love story, and yet your mom struggles. And I've seen this with other older folks I know, you know, where you talk about how your mom pretty much took care of your dad for much of the adult life, and she sort of has mixed feelings about it, and doesn't want the change, and sort of rebels and acts out towards your dad. And that must have been very interesting and complicated for you as well.
Yeah. You know, another point that's made in the book is that you change whose side you're on, because first you're on your mother's side and trying to help her out in some ways against your dad, and then it's your dad that you're trying to defend. So yeah, it can get really complicated and confusing.
And then there's a relationship with your sister too, and your siblings, and making everybody kind of on the same. I mean, it's very complicated.
Yeah, we had a family meeting. My sister and I were pretty much on the same page all the time. But my brother lives in Hawaii, and so he wasn't there very often. But we had a family meeting, and I think many people who have been through something like this have also had that experience. And the purpose of the family meeting is to get everybody together in one room and figure out who needs what and how you're going to accomplish this. And I remember my brother coming to the meeting on the phone, and here was all this discussion about, this is what we have to do in the home, and my concern is that they get this kind of care, and we've got to get my dad to go to the VA center so my mom can have some respite, and my mom can't take it was heavy and it was hard. And there was my dad, who at that point really could not particularly follow what was going on, and he just sat there just so quietly and really kind of elegantly, and not at all the fierce presence that he used to be, just a kind of gentle man who was letting all this happen, and not being defensive, not being argumentative, just sitting there. And then my brother got on the phone and he said, "Hey, Dad, you want to go for a motorcycle ride?" And it was like, yeah, that's what we need. It's just something, it sounds like you it'd be nice for you to get out of there. So that was actually, for me anyway, a really nice moment. And I think something nice for my dad to think about. I think the hardest thing for me was to understand that the things I was asking my father to do in terms of giving my mom a break, he was incapable of doing. He couldn't do it. My mom would say, go in the den and do your Sudoku, or listen to your music, or watch one of your movies. He couldn't. And it was at that meeting when I finally got it. Oh my God, he's gone that far then. He can't do that anymore. So then what? Then you have to move on to the next plan.
I was so moved during this is something that happened in my family too, when you were dealing with the cognitive test of your dad, and you're sort of, kind of what's going on, and yet you're sort of angry at the test giver because they're not being fair.
Shoot the messenger. Yeah, shoot the messenger. But I was a nurse, and I'm aware still of how very important body language is in situations like this. If there's someone in the room, as there was, who's checked out, they're sitting there, but they're not really there. And it's rude. and it makes you feel like your loved one is not being well tended. And it was hard for me in that instance. It was very hard for me to say to one guy who looked really sleepy and disengaged, "Did you have a fun time last night? Did you go out and have a great time? Are you tired?" And there is, it's actually my second favorite passage in the book, of what occurs to you to say that you don't say when the doctor says, "Are there any questions?" And you want to say, "Yeah, I've got some questions," and go through this litany of things that your dad can do, or at least could do, that he would never have been able to do. There was a point at which they were totaling up my dad's score for how he did in certain segments of a test. So the woman's saying, "You got a 4 out of 5 here, you got a 3 out of 5 here. Here you got 2 out of 5, back up to 4 out of 5, a number of categories." And then she's going to figure out his average. So she takes out her calculator and she starts to enter the number. And my dad says 4.5. And he was exactly right. So that moment of victory was very sweet.
Lisa, I just want to say my father could add up a lot of numbers in his head, and so I love that. I love that your dad could do that. Lisa, go ask.
Well, and it's hard. These are, it was so moving in so many different ways, and I think it's going to help people move into how to ask those kinds of questions. Do you have anything specific that you would share, like, be extra gentle with yourself, references that you would recommend for anybody that, because I've seen that a lot of chat in there, people are going through this or have gone through this.
That's a really good point, because you're going to screw up. You're going to screw up. You're going to say things and do things that you regret. And you do have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive a lot of stuff in yourself and in other people. And it's kind of a miracle, I think, the way that forgiveness works. From the time we're little kids, we're taught that when you do something wrong, you have to apologize. You have to say those words, "I'm sorry." And it's astonishing to me how effective those words are all your life. There was a point at which I told my mother, I apologized to my mother for being so hard on her. And I said, I'm sorry I was mean to you. And she said, "Oh, that's okay. I'm getting used to it." So at least she had a sense of humor about it. But, you get frustrated. You get to a point where you don't know what to do and you lose your temper and you start thinking, well, I'm just going to push. I'm just going to push this time. And that's not particularly effective.
And it's so much like parenting, but bringing it up like that makes it seem like it's somehow infantile, but it is so much those things that you have to apologize when you make a mistake to your child. You have to forgive yourself. But we have all kinds of, literature that way, but not so much. I guess there's a lot more now.
Yeah.
We're dealing with our
that and I think it's tempting, at least when things first start happening and your parent or your loved one, whoever it is, starts saying things over and over, or starts saying, yeah, there's somebody living in my closet and he comes out at night and he messes around with my stuff, and obviously it's not true. And so you're a victim of your own logic and you're saying, no, that seems true. I understand that seems true to you, but it's not true. And that you have to let go of sometimes, and just let them, just move on. Or I took care of a patient once who had Alzheimer's, and I was refreshing her flowers. I went to go get some water to put in the vase. I brought them back in her room and she said, "Oh, someone sent me flowers." What good would it do for me to say, no, you've had these are, let her have her flowers again and again and again. Why not? So,
I was one of the things in terms of your relationship with your dad is that was very interesting about the book, and probably people who read your Facebook and stuff know more about this, but that you had a very different relationship as a younger woman with your dad than you did later on, and that you almost feel that it was changed by writing durable goods.
Yeah.
Talk a little about that. That's really fascinating. We're like, should I write a book to fix one of my relationships?
Yeah, probably.
I have to work on
Durable
that.
Goods is my first novel. It's a coming of age novel. And it's about, it's really about coming to terms with a father who terrifies you. It's about trying to find the compassion rather than the fear or the anger. It's a 12-year-old girl on an army base in Texas. It's really good. You ought to read it. It used to be my favorite novel of all my novels. But seriously, though, as is often true in first novels, a lot of this was highly autobiographical, including my great fear of my father, including the way that he was, he believed in corporeal punishment, and he could be really tough. So after I wrote it, this is a similar story. After I wrote it, I told my mother that I had written this book and that I could publish it, but I I wasn't sure how my father was going to feel about it. So she said, send it to me and I'll read it and I'll tell you what I think. Because I told her the same thing I told my sister, I won't publish it if you think it's. So my mom read it and she said, I think your father would be hurt more by your not taking advantage of this opportunity than he would be by anything that you've said or represented in here. So I published it. And when he read it, he was in the little TV room with my mom and he said to her, was I this bad? And she said, you were pretty bad. And so what it did was open up to dialogue between the two of them, between my father and me, issues that had happened that nobody had ever talked about. And my sister and I too, when she read the book, I said, it's not my imagination that these things happen, right? These things happen. And she said, yeah. So that was the first time my sister and I had talked about a lot of things. And in the end, after, I think he was sort of hurt at first, but in the end, it brought us so much closer together. He really became my guide. He was a difficult man for many, but I really landed on the side of having so much admiration for him. And my partner, Bill, who met my dad late in life, I think Bill was like a son to my father, and my father was like a father to Bill. They had a really great relationship. I think my father told Bill things he never told anyone else, which Bill told me, so I
Oh, Bill.
Yeah. So sometimes I think, yes, sometimes I think that those kinds of taking those kinds of risks are really worth it. I sure hope so. In the case, again, of this book, I hope that people get something from it that can help them, that will have made it worth it.
Well, I'm passing this to Lisa, but we have a mutual friend who's actually struggling with some of these issues with her in-laws, and I won't give anything away about that, and Lisa basically said to her, you need to read this book. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give her my copy tomorrow.
Oh,
so.
Good. Yeah, and Elizabeth, I remember one trade show where you were being honored and your parents came to dinner. And I have a very vivid memory of them being in that event and sitting with you in Minneapolis. And it was lovely to have that while I read this. Because there was they had such, you can just see such admiration of you, and there was such a family love there. So it was nice to have that little peek in at that point.
Yeah, I'm glad you were there. My mom came for the books. You got a lot of free books. It was great. She came home with this big pile of books. She was a great reader.
Daniel, are there any questions we want to bring up in
the chat? We've got a lot of, I'm going to tell you, Elizabeth, you're getting, we were like, please don't beg for questions. Nobody ever asks anything. And people are like, I must ask 100 questions. So Nancy wrote that her father is still 90 and active, also a retired military officer. And she wants, but is having some issues. And she really wanted to thank you for the validation that she's moving in the right direction, not judging and worrying about it, but just looking at it and appreciating the simple things. So
that's
anyway,
cool. Thank you.
I'm going to say there's not that many questions. There's a lot of compliments.
Just a lot yeah.
Stephanie Ramirez wrote, we talked a little about this, but we want you to do it again because we're all like, really? Did you edit yourself to protect your family, and what kind of workarounds did you do? People, we know that memoirs aren't always 100% true. First of all, they're always from your perspective, and secondly,
I think I don't know how other people write memoirs. This is the first time I've done it, but again, I didn't plan on publishing it when I wrote it. I wrote it to get this stuff out. After I knew I was going to publish it, of course, I read it again, and I didn't I didn't use last names. There is a story I tell about one, a cousin's husband who was very judgmental of me. It was at a time when I was thinking, I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it to do this. I don't know if people who are in this book will look at it in the same way as a stranger might. A stranger might say, thank you for being so honest. This really helps me. But if they're in the book, they might not feel that way. And I recalled being at a reading. I was reading, I had published a collection of short stories called The Day I Ate Whatever I Wanted. And they were short stories all having something to do in one way or another with women and food. And in the way that you take real details from your life to put into fiction, my character was complaining about liver and onions, that her mother made liver and onions and she hated liver and onions. And I also hate liver and onions, and my mother made it, and I didn't like it then, I don't like it now, and I will never like liver and onions. So, but anyway, so there's little details in there about how the kid says, you know, she comes home and her mother's making liver and onions and she feels like committing suicide or something like that. And so this guy, this husband of my cousin, sitting there like this, you can't see, but with his arms crossed. And then he raises his hand for a question. So I call on him, he goes, well, did your mother make anything you do like? And I wanted to say, oh gosh, Lordy Lord, this is fiction. So, you know, but I said, yeah, she made tons of stuff that I liked, and I gave this litany of things that she liked. But every time I think of that reading, it's like everybody in the audience goes black and white, and in living color, there he is, thinking, you are so awful to have done this. And so I said, okay, that's it, I'm going to publish it. I'm going to publish it. So I did.
Well, you know, you run events sort of like Lisa and I do, so you know
Yep.
how that is. Like, and I do think of there's always that, we always prepare ourselves for that person that's going to drive us crazy, but only you turn it into a publishing experience.
Wait a minute. What?
Well, well, you published the book because of him saying.
Oh, yeah. No, that was a big reason. I said, well, you know, you could publish any book and get slammed for one reason or another. You're making yourself vulnerable when you publish any book. I described it once as though, you know, when your book first comes out, you're in the middle of a circle of people who are standing around you with rocks in their hand.
Oh,
You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe they'll say, that was great, let's have a rock party, I'll drop my rock and we'll paint it. Or maybe they'll hit you with it. You don't know. In the end, you have to do what makes sense to you artistically and personally. You have to end up living with yourself. So
One more question, I'll hand it to Lisa from Ruth.
Okay.
Did you learn anything about your parents or your relationship with them you hadn't realized before writing the book?
Oh, what a great question. Absolutely. That's what this book is about, really. I learned so much about them and about me, and they're both dead now, and I'm still learning about them and about me through them. Yeah, that was one of the benefits for me in going through this experience and in writing about it.
any one particular, because I was going to ask that too, any one particular surprise about your mom or your dad that sort of came up that just brought?
Yeah, there were a lot of them, but I think a lot about when my mom had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she was near the end, and you know, they tried this and they tried that and it wasn't particularly working. My mom was really short. She was like 5'1", and a little person. And here's this little person in the bed, reconciled to the fact that she was going to die. And she said, and I'm not afraid. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that about her. And I thought, she is so much stronger than I ever gave her credit for. And she displayed that kind of strength a lot of times throughout this experience, over and over again.
And I think you see it too in the way that she gets angry, but then pulls it back and then finds a place of comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and that does take a lot of strength to leave anger.
Yeah. Yeah. And to realize finally what you've lost and what you have left, to do that kind of gigantic tally. And it's a little bit ever shifting, but it, I think, it slowed down toward the end, so that she knew my dad was effectively gone, but there was some of him there, and it was with that person she interacted, she played cards with, she made lunch for, she told things to, she brought mail to, you in the end, in all of life, you take what you can get.
Yeah.
You've almost answered a question from Susan Faber, a practical question. She said her mom's dealing with Alzheimer's and doesn't recall much, can't carry on a conversation. And she would love your thoughts on how to spend visits. And I was like, so expand, take what you can get expansion.
Yeah,
I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, I think again that it can be frustrating when someone is saying something that is not true. It's a paranoid fantasy, or it's just confusing. And I think you have to have a light on inside yourself. You have to have a center of calm and peace, even. To just go back to that place like you're going to a well, and just draw from that, and then put it out, and to try to keep it as calm and loving as you can. And boy, sometimes it's really hard. Other times it's easier. So there's not a prescriptive, and your parents, and yourself to the extent that we do. And so every situation is a little different. But I think that you never go wrong coming from a place of love. You never do yourself a disservice by trying.
That's beautiful. I don't want to leave the topic, but I also don't want to make sure before we go, we just have to remember you have your show and tell of book recommendations. Don't you wish though, as your dad, like, there were like moments where you wished you could tell him something that he would have thought, that he was like, you're like, you would enjoy this so much. And sometimes it was about him. My mom had this paranoid fear, and I think this is pretty common with folks going through memory loss, that people were stealing from her. And she thought, like, when she was still living in the house, and it was not too bad, we had to lock stuff up because she thought anyone who came in to help would steal stuff. And then she was in assisted living, and she thought people were stealing from her. And then she wound up in a nursing home where the rooms were all open, and there was a woman literally walking around taking things from all the rooms. It's like, oh, you would think this was so funny. Oh,
Yeah, certainly, things in politics, and even the coronavirus. I've asked Bill probably 100 times, what do you think my parents would have said about this? How would they have viewed this, and what would they have said about the best way to get through this? And my dad and I were not on the same side politically. He really didn't like Obama, so there were things that happened positively for Obama that I wish I could have said.
Yes, like that. Lisa, do you have another question before we move to the show and tell?
No, I don't think I do. Let me check real quick because I was going to just ask because there's so much about community and you referenced that, like having the family and them moving in and having neighbors and how important it was. And I think that you really pulled that forward. And I'm assuming that you would recommend that people stay in touch with each other during all of this.
Are you talking about COVID?
No, I'm just talking during like any time with family members aging and stuff. It's just trying to keep those relationships healthy now.
Yeah, yeah, people help people. People help.
Yeah.
People. And in terms of moving to one of those places, I just want to say for people who are really worried about that and who may regret putting their parents somewhere where it's so hard to leave your house. And my mother was so resistant to the place that they moved in, but it takes a while. My mother at first would look around at her neighbors and all she could see is that person had a walker or that person used a cane or that person was in a wheelchair. And I remember saying to her, but what about the person in the chair? Why don't you look at the person? And she finally said one day, because to be honest, I'm afraid that's going to happen to me. As it did. She ended up using a walker too. But she did make that change. She did start seeing people for who they were and looked past the equipment. So one thing to hold on to and remember is that you have to let some time pass. If you do something like that, put your parents in a new place and they know they're not ever going to go home again, to just give them time. And also my daughter had to tell me, don't push so hard. She'll come to it in her own time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is it show and tell time?
Yes. But we just have to say how much we love the book. So and how many people this book, there are a lot of caregiving books out, but yours is really, it's just so powerful and it just really cuts through.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if there's other ones. So
thank you. So we talked in the green room, so to say, and I didn't get a chance. I just want to thank everybody who came to this event. It's the one positive thing about these times is that people from all over, from not only in this country, but even people from other countries, everybody can come and share. And I go to a lot of these events and listen to authors, and it always lifts me up. It always takes me away from what's going on around me. And I'm so grateful to you guys and to everybody who does these events to give us all a break. And if you've come to this and you've not come to any others before, go to them all the time. They're really fun. So we were talking about what are you reading? And reading helps me a lot. It always does, but particularly now. So I like poetry a lot. And I read poems every night. I read a few things every night. This is one of my favorites. It's Barbara Crooker. It's called Some Glad Morning. And Barb, if you think you don't like poetry, it's just because you haven't found your poet yet. And this is a highly accessible poet. She can write a poem about soup cooking on the stove, and you are enraptured. The novel, and I'm always working on a novel, and the current one is Marilynne Robinson's Jack. It's just, she's not a light, easy read. She is dense and complex, and I can't be half asleep when I read her. I want to pay attention. I think it's really brilliant, and she presents a very complex character in here that a lot of people might pass by for how he looks, but she makes you really like him. And finally, this is called Chicken, Gin, and a Maine Friendship. Have you heard of this, either of you?
I know.
Yes.
No.
So I love E.B. White, and these are letters between E.B. White and Edmund Ware Smith. Mostly about chickens, presumably, but they get into everything, and it's a very dry wit. It's funny. E.B. White cannot write a bad sentence, so all of his letters are just a pleasure to read, and it's something very different and fun.
You know, all the hot books have chickens in them. I don't know if you know this.
Well, it's a thing. Look at this. It's a little chicken. Oh, well, and wait, there's one more. Sometimes I stumble upon a book. I read a reference to a poem and I say, what's that poem? And I start going, looking around, and that's how I found this. I don't even know how to say this guy's name. Pedrig Otuama. It's called In the Shelter, Finding a Home in the World. It's very rich. Anybody who reads my Facebook page, I put a quote in from this book the other day about the notion of being here. Well, you can read it on Facebook, but it's profound, it's spiritual, it's beautiful. The guy's a poet too, so there's poets in there. So those are my four, and then I told Lisa and Daniel that Bill and I are also reading Jerry Seinfeld's hysterical book called Is This Anything? It's really funny.
Oh, well, I'm going to go get all those books. I just want to see if we've got just a lot of thank yous. Linda and Patricia and Heidi and Holly, who was overwhelmed with teaching and so far behind, she thought, I'm just going to, maybe Elizabeth Berg will make me feel better. And she just,
I'm so glad.
So we're going to, both Lisa and I have the books for sale. We send out a link with both of them. Elizabeth's going to send us some book plates, so request a book plate. If you already bought the books from one of us, just request a book plate anyway. Maybe we can send it to you anyway. And because they're very nice book plates. So super designed. So with that said, we're each going to say our good nights and thank yous. I am thanking Elizabeth Berg for a very, very wonderful hour of conversation about a very, very powerful book. And always thanking Lisa for being my conversation partner. Lisa, what would you like to thank? Since it's
well, I'd like to thank Elizabeth too for such a wonderful book, and it's been a real comfort in ways I didn't expect. So thank you. And Daniel, you're always a delight.
Well, thank you guys.
And Bill, it's been nice to see you, even though we don't see you.
I know, it is nice, yeah.
But we'll be seeing Bill, like I said, in about 9 days. So
Okay.
Wow, Rick Bragg and Bill Young, you can't beat it. Make a drink and go and listen to them.
The harder, the better. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks everybody who turned into the event. We wouldn't have a virtual event series without you. Hope to see you. Sue Miller with Elizabeth Berg, or for our event next month with Lily King. So for writers and authors.
That's a good book, Lily King.
Yay!
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.